Welcome to our closing press conference of the 5th Synodal Assembly here in Frankfurt on the Main. It is the final Synodal Assembly before a 6th Synodal Assembly that will take place in 3 years. Today, the President of the Synodal Path, Bishop Betzing, the President Irmestetter-Karp, and the Vice Presidents Bishop Bode and Professor Söding are there to answer your questions today. We will start with brief statements by our panelists. Afterwards, you will be able to ask your questions. My colleague Matthias Kopp will be the facilitator during this question and answer session. Bishop Betzing, please. Thank you very much for accompanying us during this 5th Synodal Assembly, for making it possible that many people outside learn about what is happening at the Synodal Assembly on the Synodal Path and learn about the resolutions. To be honest, it is really a weight off my mind, because a big milestone with regard to synodal learning has been reached. 3 years ago, we started here in Frankfurt, and today, with this 5th Synodal Assembly, we are concluding the Synodal Path as we agreed as the German Bishops' Conference, together with the Central Committee of German Catholics. And I am glad and grateful that, despite all ups and downs, we have come this far. The Synodal Path has worked, despite all the gnashing of teeth. It was a space of experience in which it was about listening, discussing, wrestling with each other, and also deciding. The Synodal Path is not a toothless tiger. The Synodal Path is a concretization of what Pope Francis means by synodality. Above all, it is an expression of a lively, colorful, and diverse church. For many years, we have not had such an intense common struggle about how we can live today from the gospel and the richness of our tradition, and how we can help shaping our society. We are grateful for the great interest in the Synodal Path in Germany, in Rome, and worldwide. We notice that the Synodal Path is taken very seriously in Germany, and the headwind that we feel is also a response to the spiritual force that we have set in motion through it. In the past 4 years, we have experienced that our questions play an equally important role in other countries of the world. The Synodal Path does not lead to a division, nor is it the beginning of a national church. Once again, I firmly reject such abstruse insinuations. From the very beginning of the Synodal Path, we have had in mind that there will be decisions which can be implemented in the current structures and in their responsibility by bishops in the dioceses. And tomorrow we will be able to start with that. Pope Francis in particular has encouraged us as bishops again and again to actively exercise our office and to act out of the needs on the ground. But of course, there are also decisions and topics that we cannot develop alone, but only in consensus with the Universal Church. And it is clear everywhere which questions belong to which level. However, here too, we need consultations and decisions in a synodal style. And I desire that which we bring forward to Rome will not be responded to in bureaucratic files, but sees a synodal consultation process. Because Rome is not the sole decision-making authority, but at the level of the Universal Church, there are also consultation processes needed, and it is good that through the World Synod, also at the level of the Universal Church, the means for joint consultation have been strengthened. We are learning what synodality is, and actually, with this end in Frankfurt, we have seen 5 Synodal Assembly. Finally, the coronavirus pandemic made a gift of time to us. And I am convinced that postponing the text on joint consultation and decision-making was right, because we have seen that it needs a more thorough dealing with, that it can be improved. And also discussions with responsible persons in Rome will be helpful in this context. But I would like to say that with this text, we actually establish ways of joint consultation and decision-making. Briefly before its end, the preamble text has been adopted. It was discussed very early, presented again today, because it sort of forms a parenthesis around the whole way. It was a milestone at the beginning, and now it is the milestone of what we have achieved throughout the synodal path. In 2019, at the General Assembly of the German Bishops' Conference in Lingen, the synodal path began. At the same time, there was the perception of the MHG study in the Catholics, the abuse in the Catholic Church and its obscurement. And we actually took responsibility. We, as the Bishops' Conference, asked the Central Committee of German Catholics to not leave us alone. And I'm extremely grateful that this working together from the beginning worked well and has proven itself and encouraged us to continue on this path of cooperation. And the preamble actually stands for the framework of all the results of the synodal path, the orientation, the foundational and implementation texts that have been developed. A preamble of this size, however, can best be written at the end of such a process as a kind of keystone, so that it can incorporate the results of the deliberations. All in all, it needs to be remembered that with the synodal path, we have not only faced the topics which had systemically been blocking us and which had been rumbling in the background for a long time. So we have not been able to decide on everything, but the course is set. We have also learned to work together in a new way. Various debates on the statutes have challenged us. And I would say that we have, in general, passed the stress test. With this fifth Synodal Assembly, we have achieved groundbreaking results. They show the believers and the public that this church is capable of change. And it is changing in order to be close to the people and close to God in the midst of these times. On many topics, we have clearly addressed the level of the universal church. And I do not want to qualify the results that we have agreed upon. They show, with regard to all four thematic areas of the synodal path, which were reflected in the four synodal forums, that there have been clear movements. And I am grateful that we have become very specific in the case of many resolutions. The Church is visibly changing, and that is important. In the long term, there's great potential in the fact that we have decided to continue to develop the synodal consultation process, and that we have now set up the Synodal Commission and elected the members. We are now continuing on this path courageously and resolutely. Thank you.
Dr. Immerstetter-Karp, the President of the Central Committee of German Catholics. Ladies and gentlemen, dear journalists, I'm still under the impression of the Fifth Synodal Assembly that represented both for me. On the one hand, an expression of things that not have been yet achieved, and the expression of a great successful change. What do I mean by that? Without a doubt, I would have wished for more. Above all, for the adoption of the foundational text joint consultation and decision-making with a large majority. But the text has been referred to the Synodal Committee at the suggestion of the forum chairpersons. This is good, and at the same time it shows that the Synodal path continues. It does not end here, it is just the beginning. Because now we have to implement the decisions we have taken and prepare for the Synodal Commission. The Synodal path shows a major change that cannot be appreciated highly enough. It is a great success that all major topics are now openly on the table. These are the issues that we derived from in 2018 from the MHG study, and no one can undo that. And with this we define topics for the World Synod. And we are not doing this alone, but together with many other synodal movements in other countries and other continents also. A second success. More than 3 years of synodal path have led to a new culture of dialogue. Bishops have experienced that they do not have to take decisions alone, as lone wolves, that they are allowed and able to consult and decide as a team and in a team. Catholics in these Synodal Assembly were able to experience that they were heard, that their attitudes and thoughts count, and that all together have the responsibility to deliberate and to decide. And we have decided in favor of so many things urgently needed. Blessing ceremonies for couples who love each other, for women being able to preach during services, and also for an opening towards the diaconate, that we will ask the Pope to examine the possibility to abolish compulsory celibacy, that no one should be dismissed from the church ministry because of the way they love, that gender diversity in the church is going to be recognized, that power must be shared and participation must be reorganized. In all this, we have always reminded ourselves of the beginning of the synodal path. The path started from in Lingen and led to Frankfurt. It leads from the shock at the extent and the scale of the abuse scandal to action. This church cannot remain as it is. This was the guiding principle for us, always. And it is a question of honesty, of course, to speak also of what we have not achieved. We did not manage to really change the structures of Catholic Church in Germany. 3.5 years were not enough. At this 5th Synodal Assembly especially, I have once again clearly realized that there is still a major change ahead of the Church. It will not get past it if it wants really to be part of the 21st century. And whoever takes the abuse scandal seriously must clearly work on structural changes. The 2018 MHG study made it abundantly clear. I deeply regret, and I really do mean what I say, I deeply regret that a small number of bishops in Germany want to prevent from this structural change. We cannot succeed in getting to the roots of the evil of abuse if hierarchical power prevents from it and if there are people who don't want transparency. This became again very clear in the 5th Assembly, and it has been demonstrated by some of the bishops. But I have hope. I do see that the synodal path continues. The members of the Synodal Commission have been elected. The Synodal Council will be implemented by 2026. Prepared by then. And now, on our way towards the World Synod, we are going to strengthen our networks. We are connected, linked to many, many Catholics in other countries who put their trust in us. Catholics who want to bring the Church and move the Church towards the future, from the Amazon region up to Australia. Pope Francis wants a synodal church. And for us in Germany, this means We are counting on bishops who also want that type of synodal church. The decisions of the synodal path can only be implemented if the bishops also want that. And once again, it's clear, you will know them by their deeds. Because it's all about the deeds at the end of the day, like always. Synodal path must lead into the parishes. It must reach people. The path is not over. And as I said before, it is only just beginning. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Now, the Vice President of the Synodal Path, Franz Josef Bode, Bishop Bode. Yes, welcome to all of you. I have difficulties in using the word historic, but today I would like to say it is a historic moment when the Synodal Path comes to an end at this stage with the celebration of the Mass. As Vice President of the German Bishops' Conference, I have been part of the Synodal Committee of the Synodal Path from the very beginning. And I have been able to accompany this journey for over 4 years. I've observed how steps were taken forward. I've experienced steps backward. I have seen countless conversations, meetings, and telephone calls, but all of them were important for the renewal of the Church in our country and important in the context of our faith. I admit that this path was often effortful and not easy, but it was always, for me, a source of hope, right to the end, and especially with the decision today on the text on women. We have really experienced some tailwind to move forward. And I also, when it comes to the text on gender diversity, looking back on yesterday, we can be happy and grateful that in future in Germany there will be blessing ceremonies for homosexual couples. And it is good that in future also civilly remarried divorcees will be able to have their relationship blessed by the Church. I couldn't have imagined this several years ago. But now, and it has become clear that now it is about filling the resolutions and papers of the Synodal Path with life. It's about implementing them in the parishes and taking them to the next stage. After the work on the text, now comes the implementation in pastoral life. As far as yesterday's document is concerned, a group will be set up as soon as possible to work on the liturgical pastoral manual, which will then hopefully be applied in the dioceses just as soon. After 3 years, and this applies for all to all documents of the Synodal Path, we will evaluate the experiences. And I would like to address another topic, which, as you know, is particularly dear to my heart. Yes, especially with regard to the question of women, we have taken an immense step forward, and that must not be underestimated, even though in the perspective of many women, it's only a tiny step. And I think that the bishops who were in favor of the diaconate of women and who are open to opening ministries and offices to women, we wouldn't have thought that before. And I'm delighted to see, very glad to see that we have seen this opening and have come this far. For many years, I was chairman of the Subcommission on Women in the German Bishops' Conference, and for this very reason, I am impressed by how far we have come, that we have been able to set the course in this way after a lively theological debate. Years ago, that was hardly imaginable. The Synodal Path was and is for me a place of learning how we as a church can gain new credibility in discourse, how we as a church can become salt on the earth anew, internally and externally, in order to have an impact on society, how we as a church can become truly synodal and not only talk about it, but also live it. And as I've said before, something that you once squeezed out of a tube, you cannot put it back into it. And that is why I wish for a triple for the next stage: a courageous look forward, less fear, and a deep trust in the mighty power of the gospel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We listen to Professor Söding, Vice President of the Central Committee of German Catholics. Dear colleagues, we want to continue on the synodal path. We can do so, and we're going to. And we have to. All three aspects have become evident throughout the journey. And it became evident also in this fifth Synodal Assembly. So what were our strong moments when celebrating the Eucharist together, when really coming to our senses during prayer, when listening to witnesses of faith that touched our hearts, when theological arguments have been made clear, when we had a sense of tensions that at this moment were not dissolvable, whenever we admitted to ourselves that we don't have any panacea for solving the deep crisis of the Church, but we're doing everything we can to move forward. What were our weak moments then? When wanting to be right prevailed, when the evocation of a supposedly ideal past of the Church obscured the view of what needs to change in the Church. When members of the Synodal Assembly didn't want to stand by their name for what they decided for. A leader in the Church needs to make their decision openly. The ritualized motion for a secret ballot was superfluous. We are on our way together. We show who we are. We work for the renewal and the conversion of real church. This is why ambitious realism has helped us most. During the fifth Synodal Assembly, a lot of things were launched and initiated. In Germany, as of now, there will be blessing celebrations for a couple who love each other with the blessing celebration, with the blessing of the Church. Without the initiative out in church, we still might not have taken that step. Now, queer couples who love each other and people who bless them in the name of the Church move out of the twilight zone of the forbidden into the bright space of faith. Great learning steps have led to the Declaration on Gender Diversity. Without the synodal path, this learning path would have not existed. Diaconate of women has been strengthened, and the door for the priesthood of women is still open. This will not very fast lead to changes, but the door is open. And things that are possible already is the following. We will see women preaching in mass services after the gospel. The parishes are waiting for that. They're waiting for, and they see that many people are prevented from following their call due to the situation. Whatever we decided here is not going to be implemented soon, but it is important to see that we set a sign with the decisions that we took, that we do not stand by the present things to happen and watch, but that we want to act. This is important. And it's also important that we would not have the discussions to focus on what is not possible, but on the resources and on the changes and the opportunities for change and opening. However, we also saw the Fifth Synodal Assembly, at this assembly, that the past must continue. And we are well positioned. There are very well educated and trained people willing to be candidates. Not everybody has been elected for the Synodal Commission, but everybody will stay connected to the Synodal path. A lot to do remains for the Synodal Commission. It is going to tackle with the question how synodality can be implemented on the level of the dioceses and the parishes. It was very responsible by the forum leadership not to ask for a final vote. There was too much tension in the room with regard to this topic. And I had the impression that too many bishops still think they have to defend their authority by limiting participation. I personally am sure that they damage their office by doing so. But it was right not to put anyone into a corner. It was also right not to lose out. But what I say is to show that it was right to gain time. We don't put anything on the back burner. We have the Synodal Commission available, which is capable of action. We will gather experiences in the different dioceses, and the majority of bishops want change. And they can go ahead in the dioceses. The door is open. The result of the Synodal Pact is a mixed one, though. But it couldn't be different. What is the situation of Catholic Church? It is losing credibility. It is losing many members. So no need to triumph at the synodal path. We've only begun to take care of the systemic changes that we need in order to end systemic abuse. And we're not done, and we won't be done for a long time. We have by no means exhausted all the possibilities and opportunities to using the charisms and the gift of the Spirit as the lifeblood of faith in the Church. But we started, and we can only do so and continue so on the synodal path. Thank you, Professor Söding. We start question and answers. I would like to ask the colleagues that are connected remotely to send their queries into presse@synodalerweg.de, and we will take them on. I know that many people would like to participate in the closing Eucharist. We are going to manage well. 10 minutes after the press conference, there is an additional shuttle for you to bring you to the cathedral. Please show your hand to make sure that people can give you a microphone. Thank you, Mr. Watsch. And please let us know who you addressed the question to. A question to Bishop Betzing and Bishop Bode. You are representing here also the Diocese of Osnabrück and Limburg. And Bishop Bode, you said we can start right tomorrow. So what are you going to start specifically changing in your dioceses in Osnabrück and Limburg? First of all, the change of the basic order has been implemented. Also, the Missio order in terms of a template is going to be published also for the Diocese of Limburg and is going to be implemented. In the Diocese of Limburg since 2017, we have been on a consultation process with regard to people who are not married or who don't want to get married and who ask for a blessing. And now we have an answer to our question what to do for them. And this is going to be implemented in our diocese. And in anticipation with regard to the consultation, the joint consultation and decision-making processes, we launched a transformation process in the Diocese of Limburg already, moving towards that direction, and we're going to further act upon that with regard to further joint consultation and decision-making. I can tie in with what we just heard. On Tuesday next week in our conference, in our diocesan conference, we are going to tackle a couple of topics. We have a preliminary order with regard to administration of baptism by non-ordained persons. Some people are currently being trained, and they are done with their training by the end of the year only, but we want them to be well qualified. We spoke about that in the different committees already. When it comes to the blessing for people in same-sex relationships or divorced and remarried couples, We are going to continue to further develop that questions. Every year we have a week where lay people preach during Mass, and they are qualified, and we are going to further expand that option. And we also launched a process that started recently with regard to decision-making processes in our diocese. We always had synodal committees, but we want to create more transparency. You know that this is the reason behind the rationale behind the studies. This was at stake and put into doubt in our diocese in the study. So the basic order has been implemented already and is valid already, and the missio order is going to be implemented soon. So in our diocese, there's a lot going on. Next question, Ms. Hein.
Thank you. I've got two questions. First question is to Bishop Betzing. In your statement, you said that you hope that the reform proposals that you will send to Rome will not end up in some drawers of some desk. Which kind of time frame do you imagine or do you hope for with regard to a response? And my second question is to Ms. Stetter-Karp. Bishop Betzing said last week that a situation might arise, which finally didn't arise, that some texts or text proposals might be rejected. With view to the compromises, especially regarding the text on women, did you pay a too expensive price, or would you think it would have been better to have them rejected instead of the compromises? Well, you know, Roman time frames are slightly longer, but with regard to many questions, and that has become clear during the Synodal Assembly, that we don't have much time. And I totally agree to the fact that the Catholic Church is at a crisis on a global level and needs opening and solutions that we have been presenting here. So we are integrating our questions into the context of the World Synod, and Pope Francis has taken this courageous step to open that up. And we need answers to our questions. And what is crucial here, and maybe I said it in a rather less succinct way in my statement, we do not need, you know, decisions taken in some offices of the Curia, but we need synodal processes at the level of the Synodal Church, Universal Church, that treat such questions, initiate debates, and lead to decisions. Regarding your question of how I see the resolutions, and I think you were alluding to the text on the opening of a diaconate for women. So it is not easy for someone like me to weigh things up here, because in the 1980s, when I was already in service for the church, I actually advocated the opening of the priest office for women, and that was a long time ago. So when it comes to assessing or evaluating the results, I can tell you that as a woman, you can only back the resolutions taken. You need some ambitious realism, or really to be super patient like a donkey, as we say. Without this, it is not possible to continue in this direction. But we do have allies, and I do hope and trust in a step-by-step process, or millimeter by millimeter. And I have to take a deep breaths here, that we slowly progress. Next question, Mr. Strack, please. Christoph Strack of Deutsche Welle. Question to Bishop Etzing. I would like to get back to the explanations given by Bishop Bonny from Belgium, who said that the Pope basically agreed, and he said that what was important for the Pope was that the bishops agreed. And if you listen to this recommendation, how do you think you can progress when you have this sort of black bloc here who always was in favor of a secret ballot? And will there ever be unanimity amongst the German bishops? So how will you deal with that? Well, the fact that there's no unanimity among the bishops, it doesn't prevent us from going forward. That's what we have been seeing here. And when you look at the results of the synodal path altogether, we have been seeing that bishops that are simply blocking the process at some moment need to speak up and say what they want, how they want to encounter the church, what they have in mind. So I would say this blocking mindset does not prevent us from progressing. Next question, Mr. Rauch. Question to Bishop Bode and Betzing as diocesan bishops. When, for the first time, do you think will a woman be able to administer baptism and marriage ceremony in your churches? That question was not been answered before. And a question to Mr. Takab. You said that you would like to speak with the Pope, and why don't you fight for it like a lioness? Why were you not at the funeral for Pope Benedict? Why don't you ask Cardinal Marx to organize a meeting with the Pope? And international networking, what do you hope that your allies in Switzerland and Luxembourg will do? Regarding baptism, first of all, in our case, it will be at the end of the year or beginning of next year, because the training is already, needs to be accomplished. Regarding marriages, it is basically possible as well, but there needs to be a particular standard voted on by the Bishops' Conference in order to install this. And I think this is going to be soon tackled in the context of what we have spoken about. And the second thing you said? That was it, okay, thank you. And I can tell you that in the Limburg diocese, no consultation process has been initiated, so I cannot give you a specific answer. I will only implement things if they have been deliberated and decided upon jointly. You've asked me why I don't implore the Pope in a more insistent manner in order to have a meeting. Well, you know, we have expressed our desire to do so very often. I couldn't tell you by showing my 10 fingers more than that. And simply to say, okay, let's go to Rome and knock at the door, that would not be the adequate style. The second question is something where I would like you to help me. You asked about the allies network. Yeah. Let me say, first of all, let me be self-critical, or I can talk about myself. Quite soon after my election as a president of the German Central Committee of German Catholics, I was aware of the fact that it was important to have allies, because you need allies to be aware of early warnings, for instance. But it's also a question of resources, of time, of energy you want to invest. And we have invested so much, and I'm not talking about only the two of us, all of us. We are on a path together. And from my point of view, at some moment, we reached the limits of our strength, so to speak. And I can tell you that Prague was a good learning experience for us. And we have seen that we are not alone. And over the next few weeks, we have sent out an invitation. We have received great feedback. And there will be a digital meeting in Europe. And I think we have strong allies. And you asked specifically for Benelux and Switzerland. Yeah, Switzerland. I can only tell you that I'm really looking forward to our next meetings. And step by step, we will continue. And yeah, I'm delighted, looking forward to it.
We have 18 questions, so please be brief and concise. Next is Cornelia Greifenstein. Philipp Greifenstein. My question goes to Ms. Stetter-Karp. Bishop Betzing just said that you passed the stress test, but the price was giving in with regard to the implementation texts, because they have seen restrictions imposed by the Bishops' Conference, not all of them. Not for all texts or for all resolutions. Motions were presented by the bishops only with regard to 3 of the texts. So, of course, you then need to grapple about what you want to achieve. And I gave an answer to that already with regard to the question on women. Ms. Rottweiler is next. Martin Rottweiler is next. EWTN TV. The question on the joint consultation and decision-making was one of the texts discussed in a controversial way. So what about the Synodal Commission? Can they decide and consult on that text? Because it's always about the ultimate responsibility of the bishops. You always said that the bishops have the ultimate decision. But yesterday you said that if a bishop said at the end of the day, it's my ultimate decision, that was a no-go. The Synodal Committee, the Synodal Commission prepares the evaluation of the decisions of the Synodal path. It has the task to prepare a Synodal Council in a way that it abides by the rules of canon law. And it has the task to make sure that texts that were read in the first reading only and accepted in the first reading only to further develop those with motions also, and it can also adopt those texts. A bishop takes on his responsibility by guaranteeing that process, by motivating and driving that process forward. And what I said is a no-go is alone, if he acts alone. So the responsibility of a bishop is not to be a lone wolf, but to take decisions and shape things in a joint way. Question to Bishop Betzing from Aachener Zeitung. What happens if the Vatican again prohibits the blessing ceremonies for same-sex couples? Let me say again what I said to the dubium by Cardinal Parolin and Ladaria. I said, Cardinal, the response that came up in Germany and other countries to such a red tape answer, you could have saved that. Questions of this type of quality and significance need processes. Please learn in Rome to start processes involving the many people. This is my answer also to this question. And Münchner Merkur asked, Mr. Möllers asked Bishop Betzing, the Pope just declared in an interview that he can imagine to do away with compulsory celibacy. Is that an encouragement for you that things are moving in Rome? He spoke to us in a similar direction during our ad limina visit, and the Pope presents a testimony for the fact that he is moving with regard to his sensitivity. He makes himself vulnerable. This is so great about him. And, he makes himself vulnerable, and this is the way forward also as a universal church. And the Pope said today in an interview that women are allowed to vote at the World Synod in Rome. This is also a novelty. People ask me also at a private level, can you tell us how much the synodal path cost? This is a question similar to what we heard yesterday. The German Bishops' Conference prepared a budget for the reappraisal of the MHG study, and part of that is also the budget for the synodal path. This is 2.3 million per year. This is not about the compensation for people affected, but it includes the staff for reappraisal and compensation. So synodal path, everything that has to do with the reappraisal, this is covered by a budget since 2020. And this is an ongoing budget. Next question, Mr. Odendahl. Question to Bishop Betzing about the Synodal Council or the Commission. The Synodal Commission is going to prepare the Synodal Council that Rome doesn't want to see, and also work on the paper, the document with regard to joint consultation. When are you going to Rome, and how are you going to explain to Rome what it is all about with regard to Synodal Council and how they abide by the rules of canon law? I asked for a conversation, for an appointment. I answered the 3 cardinals in a letter, and that I aligned beforehand. I urgently asked for an appointment in order to continue conversations that we started already in our very serious conversation on these topics. And we started the conversation during our ad limina visit, and I suggested the presidency or the Synodal Committee to come over to Rome and speak to them. And the next question goes to Ms. Colombo.
My question is to Bishop Betzing regarding the World Synod. What about the exchange at the European continental stage? What impact did it have on the willingness to bishops to vote on the text and to adopt them? Until now, we have only had the possibility to work with a few persons, 4 in face-to-face meetings and 10 via video conferencing at this continental stage in context with the worldwide synodal path. But I do think that the perception, and we have heard it from Latin America, from Australia, we've seen it in Prague with Austria, Switzerland, France, Belgium, Ireland, England. I could cite many more. Their questions, or our questions, are their questions, and vice versa. And I think this shows the willingness of many bishops to actually name the topics and name the direction which we can work on them. Next question, please. Philipp Gessler of Zeitzeichen. I've only got a simple question to Bishop Betzing. My question is, how many of your brothers in the bishop's office will not implement the blessing celebrations? And according to your forecast, who is this going to be? I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, so I cannot tell you. I only know, or I presume that in no diocese this will be not a question. And bishops have the responsibility to answer questions asked by the faithful. So we will see. I think we have taken a step here, a good step. We said that as soon as possible, such a manual should be worked upon. And I said it during the opening press conference that we do not want to create or conflate blessing with the sacrament of matrimony. And it needs a wise procedure here so that what we intend or what have intended here will be implemented into practice. And we have to work on it in order to prepare it accordingly. Mr. Dirkes, next. Ms. Stetter-Karp, the Würzburg Synod at the beginning of the 1970s, that is 50 years ago, asked or demanded the diaconate of women. So Rome did not respond for 50 years. And why do the women now look so joyful? And I saw some drinking sparkling wine and celebrating. What is the reason now to say, now we've made it? I cannot give you an answer why the women are celebrating. I didn't see them. I was maybe not close to the place where they were drinking sparkling wine. I rather had the impression that women here at the conference, let's not repeat what I said before. I perceive more women who are not celebrating. They rather say, why do we still stand here and have not advanced more? So next colleague of Tagespost, the one wearing a face mask. Jakob Hanke is my name of Tagespost. Bishop Betzing, I would like to ask you, what is the general perception of the Synodal Assembly? There were some hurdles, hurdles regarding decisions, difficulties of continuing to identify with the church, young generation. Do you think that the results of this synodal path will have an impact on the number of people leaving the church? I will be quite realistic here. The enormous numbers of people leaving the church have different reasons, and I think the main reason has been that people who were baptized as children, and if for years they have not had any relationship with the church, they take this step. So I don't think that we will see any significant change with regard to the numbers of people leaving the church. That is my forecast. However, people who are involved in the church, who are connected, who have been asking questions for years, questions of how long can I stand this stagnation, and when am I going to leave? I think to those we have sent out a strong signal. Bishop Bode wanted to comment on the question of women. Yes, I've got. Yes, the women, there were mixed feelings. Some were in tears, and those were not tears of joy. Some are very disappointed that they have to content themselves with such a small progress. And of course, we are glad that the bishops have agreed on helping things go forward. And I have been asked whether I was relieved, and I said, no, I'm not really relieved, because it's a tiny step, and I would have wished for a more clear vote in favor of women in both offices. So there's sort of a mix here, and I don't really see a celebration with a sparkling wine now. Okay, next question. Please raise your hand so that the mic can be given to you. Thank you. Wenn Sie denken auf Christ in der Gegenwart, I've got a question to Mr. Söding. I quote your statement that the gate to the priest's office of women is open and will remain open. Well, I think the door is opened only a tiny bit, but what do you mean by saying it is and remains open? There wouldn't have been any consent regarding this text on diaconate of women if there had been a strong rejection at the same time to keep this door closed. It has already been worded in the foundational text on women that there is going to be talks about the priesthood of women. And that is what I meant by opening. And I am firmly convinced as soon as we have entered into a thorough theological discussion, this door will open even more. And Mr. Frank, please, Bishop Betzing. Your brother from Regensburg spoke about violations of law that will need to be documented. I think that relates to procedural matters such as dealing with secret ballots, counting minorities, etc. So if you look at the numbers of the Bishops' Conference, I'd say that, if I'm not mistaken, in many votes, the bishops didn't even vote. So they didn't even abstain, they simply didn't vote. So you think that this is an attempt of delegitimizing the synodal path? What do you think? What is your comment? The synodal path as a process or procedure is closed today. So the statutes and the rules of procedures have served their purpose, and now, well, it is done. They had been created for that. From the beginning, there have been attempts to delegitimize the process. There have been attempts, but they didn't lead to a success, and it will be the same in the future. There will still be those attempts. And we never said that we would be working here without any mistakes. And I can tell you, knowing and having experienced the life of the synodal path, I know what the big weak points of the statutes and the rules of procedure were. Once again, I am grateful for the wisdom reigning in the General Assembly, and the highest authority was the sovereignty of the Assembly itself. And this is why in all critical situations, the Assembly itself was the main decision maker, and that's the highest degree of legitimacy that you can reach in such a procedure. So we haven't had a canon law or regulation, a standard that we could have based ourselves upon, because we wanted to work this way, because we felt obliged to work this way. Meaning, there was this idea of a particular council, but that was out of the question because it prescribes the memberships in such a rigid order, and we couldn't have worked the way we worked here. And it led to the wise idea that raised many doubts in the beginning, but a very wise idea that we open up our space of law where the synodal path can develop.
Michael Sturm, Public Forum. I would like to tie in with what we just heard. Several times you said, or had to say, that the bishops were too lazy to read the text. They know that they have, after the assembly, the option not to implement things that have been decided. When it comes to the consultation, this is still a black box. Why are you so positive and so sure, that things, will be implemented, and that sooner or later, things will not be followed up upon? This goes to Bishop Betzing, but Ms. Shetterkap, I'm also interested in your perspective. You support us, you know. Things are out in the world, the media covered it, and people are living everywhere who are going to ask of the bishops to implement things. And a sufficient number of bishops is going to implement new ways of acting. And in a small country like ours, with the limitations and the borders of dioceses, that is not of importance for the faithful, you know, and things will unfold a dynamic with a sufficient number of bishops. And I'm positive. From my perspective and background as a full-time employee in the church, I can tell you that the older I grew, the more I learned that paper is not always patient, but that it's all about, at a certain point, that when it comes to a major project, you need to invest a lot of energy in the question how an implementation plan can look like. And you have to dwell on the details of those plans beforehand. And let me add to that the following. I smiled when I heard that question. When do we start the blessing ceremony specifically, and in which diocese? And I know many Catholics who will cover distances if they don't get ceremonies where they live. There will be different speeds in the different dioceses, but the bishops who do not implement things, you know, will have to ask themselves at a certain point while people leave and go to other dioceses. Katholisch.de, Rainer Zentis. Katholisch.de, Benedikt Heider. My question is, you said questions will be addressed to Rome after the World Synod. You need answers. It can be a yes or a no. What happens if you get a no with regard to ordination and celibacy? I have a lot of trust in the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit just showed that it can move a lot of hearts and souls. And I do believe that the Holy Father is unlimited in his faith, that the Holy Spirit is active. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so bold to call for a world synod. A world synod that nobody knows what the result will be. I admire him, and I put my trust in that approach. Egon Schlegelmilch, Domradio. Just a brief question, Bishop Betzing, about the procedures with Rome. You said you asked for an appointment, a personal appointment, and you're going to feed things into the World Synod. But the documents are basically ready. Is there a schedule, a specific process that you're going to follow? Or do you just ask for an appointment and present the papers? There are more than 10 documents. So the appointment that you ask for is the answer to the response that bishops cannot establish a synodal council, as the nuncio also replied. So this was the specific question. And when it comes to feeding things to the World Synod, we did that already. The paper of the national conferences, and they mirror our topics. In Prague, we fed into the conference other topics. And also other countries fed the same topics into the continental phase in Prague. And so the World Synod already tackles those topics. But let me underline, once we go back to the Bishops' Conference, and the Secretariat is going to give us a hand, we need to go through the papers to understand all the aspects where we need to go back to Rome to understand and create a follow-up. We will ask them for the individual aspects for appointments. We will refer the resolutions to them, and we will put forward the questions that need clarification. We have 15 resolutions that were taken by the Synodal path, and we're going to dwell on that also later on in our publication on part of the press office. There are two more questions. Mr. Waschke, let me come back to the international network and the conversation with Rome. Ms. Besser-Stetterkarp and Bishop Betzing, we just heard that it's not always about the what, but about the how. We're Germans, we are so harsh with regard to language. Did you get any inspirations in Prague? Did you learn things? How we can change our way of arguing, and maybe we need to be more soft with regard to our wording? This makes me smile, because my spontaneous thought was we are practicing things. Really, we're practicing. We want to see the best results, but there are limits to the results. I will not be able to change my character. I will not do that, but I'm practicing things. Mr. Gassner in the very back, and then Mr. Rothweiler. Klaus Gassner of the Konrad magazine, Bishop Betzing. I'm clear that many of our readers are very happy when they read about women, gender diversity, and the latest resolutions. But there were also people standing in front of the building praying. How does communication work to prevent from cracks, so to speak, and miscommunications with a group that are not represented in what you do? There are people in the dioceses, in the country, in the parishes, who have difficulties with the resolutions. People who want different things, different type of dynamic. This time, due to the time schedule, it was not possible for us to meet those groups. But in the past, during our bishops' conferences, as well as during the synodal assemblies, we always met with those groups. The question is, what do we take from them by our resolutions? Just please implement and live what is important to you. We are not going to take that away from you. So the question is, what do we take away from you? And if you ask that questions, that you reach the core of the matter. And oftentimes, it's more about mental reasons. It's not so much about expressing one faith. It's not so much theology. The question is, how much security do I need when expressing my faith? Willingness for dynamic. How free am I? The freedom to live what is at somebody's heart. We don't take things away from people. And I encourage this group of people. Nobody wants you to live in a reality that is strange to you. Mr. Rothweiler. Martin Rothweiler, EWTN TV. A question to Dr. Stetterkarp. You apologized this morning for what you said yesterday, and Auxiliary Bishop Schwadalab said that blackmailing power was expressed by the bishops. Is it okay for you if bishops say, I cannot go with certain resolutions due to my conscience? And we also heard that 4 people were not replaced with the right to vote in the Synodal Assembly. And people also in Prague asked why there were no affected people among the delegates. And we heard now that every Bishops' Conference was free to appoint people for Prague. Why did you not appoint a person affected for Prague? I did not apologize this morning. You know, I stand by my statement from yesterday. But yesterday, together with Bishop Betzing and our responsibility, I took on that responsibility because we were concerned that a dynamic came up that is not positive with regard to a resolution. And this morning, I thanked people because the attitude was very positive. And I wanted to pay respect to the bishop's attitude. So these are two distinct things. With regard to, I need to respect the bishop's conscience and their decision. You know, but I reached the limit when it comes to communication that people don't communicate. And one bishop said, "This is so strange to me. I need to learn about that. I will abstain today." You know, I respect that decision, but not if people don't communicate. In Prague, I did not speak about people affected by abuse specifically, but LGBTQ young people and where they are. And in fact, in our delegation, in our video delegations, people of those groups were included. But deliberately, we did not choose people affected by abuse. This is accurate. Dear colleagues, together with Ms. Baas, I would like to thank you for bearing with us these 3 days. I would like to thank the technicians enabling for the stream. They made sure that technology was available everywhere. I would like to thank the interpreters who interpreted the press conferences live. It is a major challenge given the amount of questions and answers. And on behalf of Ms. Baas and myself and our teams of the press offices of the Bishops' Conference and the Central Committee of German Catholics here in Bonn and Berlin, I would like to thank everybody for their great work. The shuttle leaves at 2:15 with the Synodal Committee also. If you want to come back, you need to take care of getting back yourself. You can still use the rooms until 6 p.m. Thank you again for your great interest, and let's go on. Let's move on. Thank you so much.